How do you plan a future in a country where inflation stands at 200%? Electricity has become a luxury item, and war is at your doorstep. Young people in Lebanon are facing a multitude of crippling crises, and today we ask, how are they coping? I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream.
This is the area where the Israeli occupation forces threw two missiles that broke half the houses in my village.
Pregunto cuál tú quieres, este o este, este o este.
حبيبي جينا على لبنان كلنا للوطن للعلا للعلم للعين الزمن سيفنا والقلم.
While on social media, you may still come across people living their best lives in Beirut or Fakhra. The full picture encompasses different realities on the ground in Lebanon. The economy and the government have all but collapsed, and the consensus among geopolitical and financial analysts, as well as residents, is that the country cannot afford an all-out war. But with more than 100,000 people displaced, over 500 killed, and nearly 2,000 injured since October last year, it seems like parts of Lebanon have already become battlegrounds, and hope for things to sort themselves out is in short supply. To discuss, we're joined today by Sara Rammal, a content creator from the south of Lebanon who has been recently forced to move to Beirut. Diana Menhem, managing director of anti-corruption NGO Kulluna Irada. She's also in Beirut. Abbass Abbass is a poet who recently moved from Lebanon to Malaysia to continue his studies. And Ronnie Chatah, who's a political analyst and host of the Beirut Banyan podcast, who's also joining us from Beirut. Thank you all so much for being part of the stream today. I'd like to start the show with this Instagram post by our colleague Ali Hashim, who wrote about a big loss for his family. Ali Youssef Mahdi was killed today with his first cousin Hussein in an Israeli drone strike near Nakuda. That's a small city in the south of Lebanon. Ali was an engineer who worked in Sierra Leone and happened to be my aunt's eldest son, hence my first cousin. He left Lebanon for a brighter future abroad, and when he came back, he felt the urge to visit his village, and he and his cousin were both targeted. Sarah, Ali was not even 30 when his car was targeted by Israel. And I mean, when you hear stories like that, I guess it doesn't make sense to say that Lebanon is on the verge of war for bereaved families that have lost their loved ones, or for families like yours that have been displaced because of this escalation of hostilities. It seems as though war is already a reality.
Yeah, actually, war has been a reality since October 8th. Like, on October 8th, I was listening to the bombs going, like, above my house. I was seeing them, like, going to the Israeli settlements, and it's been like we've been seeing the retaliation back and forth, the light flares and the bombs in the middle of the night. Like, it's been a reality for people in South Lebanon, especially people on the border. We've seen like a lot of innocent people die. It's been a reality for a very long time, but people outside that area don't really feel it because they aren't directly affected by it. Like I think they only like started to feel it when Beirut was bombed for the first time.
It's almost like it's a multitude of countries in one sometimes, isn't it? Diana, when experts say that Lebanon cannot afford an all-out war, what do they mean? How would you describe life in Lebanon today?
I mean, the Lebanese, as you have said in your introduction, are definitely suffering from two huge catastrophes. The first is an economic crisis that has been ongoing since 2019, with poverty rates by some references getting as close as 80%.
Wow.
And today, for the past 10 months, the Lebanese have been witnessing an ongoing Israeli aggression. And both of these events have been devastating on the Lebanese. The crisis has led to mass immigration out of the country. And today, Israeli aggressions and Hezbollah's decision to actually open a front in south of Lebanon on October 8th are polarizing the Lebanese to extents never seen before. The Lebanese are asking the question, are we being used by Iran today to advance Iran's interest? What is our interest in this war? And how is this war in Lebanon really helping the Palestinian cause, as Hezbollah claims?
Ronnie, you have lived through a war in Lebanon, Lebanon's civil war. Can I have your take here on how Lebanon today compares to the Lebanon you grew up in back in the 80s?
The parallel for me is two things. The first is the 1980s, and that the scenery is familiar. Infrastructure on the decline, mounds of trash burning on a daily basis, no real concern, or for that matter, interest in governable activity, meaning Lebanese have largely let go of their belief in a governable Lebanon. And this is years and years of paralysis in the country that Diana alluded to. But beyond the 1980s, and there's a fundamental difference, 1980s, it was still civil war. And you had a variety of militias battling it out for 15 years, from 1975 until 1990. The more familiar I feel is less to do with the 1980s today and more the 1990s, and that southern Lebanon was a battlefield, and at that time still occupied by the Israelis. The fundamental difference, of course, is that now we're 34 years after the civil war ended. Israel pulled out of South Lebanon in May 2000. 24 years after Israel's withdrawal, we're unfortunately lured in once more into another war. But going back to what Diana said already, I think beyond polarization, the attempts to rebuild Lebanon after the civil war and the attempts to emerge from Syrian occupation in 2005, the last 2 decades of an independent country that remains in the imagination of many, dreams of sovereignty, those have faded away. And in 2024, for better or worse, we're being involved in a regional war that no Lebanese voted for, no Lebanese wished for. On the contrary, the Lebanese are not able to suggest otherwise in 2024.
Sara, you are a content creator and you have been posting about your parents' experience in the 80s, but also about what's happening to your family right now. How important has it been to convey this message over the last few months, and what kind of reaction did you get on social media?
Okay. So since the beginning of this war, I had to learn a lot of things that my parents had to go through during occupation. I learned that since I was born on the border with Israel or occupied Palestine, I have to go through these things because whatever I do, I can't leave this place because it's the place I was born in, it's the place I belong to, and I will always be on the plan of Israel to colonize these lands. So I've been learning myself and I've been sharing about it. I've been sharing what's happening right now and what happened with my parents before. I've had the privilege to share in English with people outside Lebanon who didn't have an idea of how people here live. So I've had some reactions that people actually care about me and support me. But Israelis would send me death threats and comment on my posts. But I've had to build a community of people who support people who live in South Lebanon and who've been affected by this war.
Abbas, Sarah saying there that Lebanon is the place where she belongs. She will not leave. You have left. You have said that this is temporarily. This is temporary. You will go back to Lebanon. You also feel very much part of that country. We came across this particular cartoon when we were producing this show. It depicts the reality of so many young people in Lebanon who, like you, have to leave at least for a period of time. But how many people do you know that have been doing the same, and what kind of impact on your country and the future?
Between the group that I know and everything, I was the only person that actually took the decision to study abroad, and it was very quick, and it was a very quick decision I made because, first of all, hey, there's no creative writing workshops or courses in Lebanon that are offered, and I'm really interested in actually building the skill and getting a degree in creative writing so I can hopefully probably come back, and I want to give workshops.
I was going to say it's hard, isn't it, to envisage that, to envisage going back in the midst of what we've been describing: no government, lack of basic services, lack of jobs. I know you really want to, but don't you fear your future in Lebanon when you see the state of the country today?
Of course, I fear the future when I'm in Lebanon. It's a collective fear between. I mean, all youth share this collective fear of what am I going to do in the future, and what degree should I study in order to have a decent job, or what skills should I have? And the thing is with the youth in Lebanon is that you don't only go to college to study and get this degree and okay, you have a job now. No, you have to do a lot of workshops. You have to learn this skill and learn that skill. And then you're not fit enough for a job that is an entry-level job. So
and
it's
then
very
even
hard down here.
And then even when you do land a good job, inflation is at 200% and your salary is just not going to cut it. Diana, one of the main aspects that we've been talking about here is this economic meltdown and is the destruction of the middle class, isn't it? I mean, the backbone of virtually any country. Can you talk to us about just how concrete this crisis has become?
Absolutely. I mean, we should understand that today the Lebanese economy is dependent on two things: aid that comes from donor countries and remittances that come from the Lebanese diaspora. And this dependence has been growing ever since the crisis. The Lebanese model today, the Lebanese economic model today, is actually based on exporting youth. Every family has at least one or two members that are outside of the country, that are working outside of the country, and that are sending dollars back to the country. And this is a model that obviously is unsustainable. This is a model that is obviously unproductive in the country. And this is a model that is destroying the country's demographic and societal makeup. As you mentioned, the middle class has been totally killed from 2019 until today. What we see today is huge inequality between a class of high-income people that are still able to basically go out, etc. And these are the photos that you see of restaurants being full, of people partying, but it's mostly Lebanese that are living in total insecurity, waiting for their family members abroad to send them some money in order for them to be able to sustain themselves. And a middle class that has lost all of its savings and that is now incapable of rebuilding the economy and even incapable of rebuilding its own economic power.
How sad is that? I mean, a country that is exporting its youth is heartbreaking. I mean, a country of extremes, indeed. We've mentioned this before, a few countries, at least in one. Lebanon is certainly home to very different realities today. Take the Lebanon of social media, for example, as Diana was just mentioning, where you mostly find the partying, but also the sense of humor. Take a look.
The people of Lebanon are not only resilient, but they are comedic geniuses. The Lebanese people basically created a website called Jdar Sot, or in English, Sound Barrier, where they rate the sounds of the occupation fighter jets breaking the sound barrier. Let's check out some of these reviews. Was not loud, very disappointed with the pilot tonight, 3 out of 10. 8 out of 10, thank God I wasn't paragliding. It's also being used as a site to confess feelings for one another. This person gave the occupation fighter a 6 out of 10 for breaking the sound barrier and used this opportunity to confess her feelings for Mr. Kamal. 4 out of 10, another one, DJ Khaled.
I mean, Ronnie, it is funny, but is it cognitive dissonance here, or is it just a normalization of, I don't know, a multitude of tragedies that Lebanon has had to face throughout its recent history?
Well, I'll try to offer a parallel example to most comedians that I listen to that are not Lebanese. They often search for some pain in their lives to then find the story and share it in a funny way. I mean, Lebanon is full of pain, so I think it makes sense that we have probably the best sense of humor in the world today. But I don't think that's a good thing given what's leading to this sense of humor. Also, that there's a sense of prolonged insecurity and political paralysis. That is familiar too. Add to that something that is not really talked about much anymore given time passes in Lebanon. And of course, the attention span to Lebanon is short at best outside the country. But this country just emerged from the largest non-nuclear blast in modern history.
Absolutely.
And the city paid the city is still recovering physically, emotionally, mentally. I live in an apartment that was heavily damaged as a result of that blast. I'm going to guess most people on the panel know people or suffered themselves as a result of August 4, 2020. Now that's history. If you go further, post 2005, and I'll leave that year as a marker for one reason. The first time Lebanese rallied in a serious way for political purposes. And that's March 14, 2005. That's the first attempt at shaking the system through political protest and demonstration. Roughly a quarter of the population participated in what was then largely anti-Syrian occupation chants. It's not the first time. Just 5 years ago, October 2019, maybe half the population of Lebanon throughout the country, not just Beirut, rose up on October 17, 2019, demanding an end to paralysis, the status quo. Chants for accountability, reform, and decency were mainstay. And that's 5 years ago. And today, you have a country that's unrecognizable. So I think the resilience, if that's the word, the ability to adjust is part of our DNA today, for better or worse, because Lebanon has been a battlefield since 1970, since Lebanon entered regional war and couldn't get out. And that's the Cairo Agreement that sealed Lebanon's fate. That's 54 years ago.
Wow. I would like your take, each one of you, in terms of what needs to happen for a different Lebanon in the future, one that doesn't see a repeat of this precise chapter that we're seeing here, as Ronnie just mentioned. Sara, can I get you to go first? What needs to happen so that Lebanon is a stable, sovereign country, and one where you can place all your bets of a better future?
Okay, so I don't think there's any possibility that Lebanon can be stable in the presence of power like Israel on our border. They've been crossing all boundaries. I live on the border and I've seen what they've been doing. They always, like, if it didn't start now, it will start later, and they will start to take control over Lebanon, even if the war didn't happen. So as long as Israel is there, I don't think there's any possibility that Lebanon can get any better.
So no stable Lebanon with Israel next door. Abbas, your take.
The way I see the problems in Lebanon is that it comes in multiple layers. First of all, you have the presence of Israel at the borders. Its aggression, its political and military aggression that has been happening in our country. Second of all, we have the sectarianism as long as there's sectarianism in Lebanon, I don't see any involvement in this country, societally speaking, economically, politically, and even socially. So if we want to change Lebanon, and as long as there's sectarianism, and as long as there's, this sect of Muslim hates this sect of Christian, and this sect of Christian hates this sect of Christian, then there's a huge problem we will always face as a collective.
Diana, what is your take? What would it take to bring back a sense of hope in the future to the Lebanese?
The Lebanese today are living under the control of a very tight alliance between what we call a mafia, which is a political and financial class that is corrupt to the bones, and a militia. And by that, I mean Hezbollah. And it is this very tight alliance between the mafia and the militia that has brought the country to its knees and that has brought us to where we are today. The Lebanese in 2019 have said very clearly, we want neither the mafia nor the militia. And I believe, contrary to some of the comments here, that the Lebanese can actually take matters into their own hands. In 2000, nobody believed that we could get Israeli occupation out of the country. In 2005, nobody believed that we could get Syrian occupation out of the country. And I believe that today, although yes, it is very hard, and it is maybe a very long-term project, but I believe that the Lebanese will be able to generate a political class that really deserves to govern this country, a political class that is able to give the Lebanese the opportunities that they deserve in Lebanon, and that is able to keep the Lebanese in Lebanon. And this is a struggle that has been ongoing and that will continue as long as there are people who believe in this country and who believe that they deserve better.
A hopeful note there. Ronnie, final word from you. What will it take to restore the trust in Lebanon?
I'll give an example of a regional war that reshaped the Middle East forever, and that's June 1967. And we still talk about 1967 until today, where the Israelis occupied the West Bank and Gaza Strip. They occupied the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. They took East Jerusalem and the West Bank from Jordan, and also occupied and later annexed on their terms the Golan Heights from Syria. And the reason I'm referring to this war is that no one refers to Lebanon because Lebanon was not involved. Not one bullet was shot across the border from each side, and Lebanon survived a regional war. So I have to disagree with the premise that Lebanon cannot survive as long as Israel is next door. We actually did, and we shined in 1967. But I'll take it one other place. The issue of sectarianism has been discussed since Lebanon's inception. The issue of sectarianism will be discussed long after all of us are dead. Sectarianism was worse in the 1960s among Christians and Muslims, and Lebanon had its glory years. So I don't know if it's true that we're simply built wrong, or for that matter, we're prone to end up where we are today. I have to suggest one thing. The last time Lebanon was able to control and shape and even diplomatically pursue a better path for all of its inhabitants was in the 1960s. The rare example of its attempt once more was in July and August 2006, with the Lebanese state trying and actually accomplishing a ceasefire agreement, a UN Security Council resolution that everyone talks about today, 1701. The Lebanese state was involved in its inception. Now, go 20-some years later, in 2024, the Lebanese state is not involved one bit in diplomacy or, for that matter, shielding Lebanon from regional war.
And Lebanon and the Lebanese certainly deserve better. Sara, Diana, Abbass, and Ronnie, thank you all so much for being part of the stream today. And thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to keep the conversation going online. You can send us your feedback using the hashtag or the handle AJStream. Take care, and I'll see you soon.